Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the day two of Thermal Power Operations and Maintenance Virtual Conference 2021. As you all know, because of the current pandemic scenario, we have shifted our gears and organized this edition as a virtual event. And moving forward, day one, we ended up with a wonderful note where we started with our session with Dr. R.V. Shahi ji, and we moved on with Mr. Janmajaya Mahapatra, who's the CEO for Java Power, and then we were joined by Mr. Ashwini Kumar Sinha, who's a principal consultant for CWMC. Right after that, we saw a wonderful presentation where speakers talked about the comprehensive operations and maintenance for thermal power plants, where we were joined by Mr. Mahapatra, Mr. Alok Mukherjee, and Mr. Arnab Bhaumik. Right after that, we spoke about diagnostic analysis and root cause analysis with budget management, where we were joined by Mr. Y.V. Rao, former Executive Director NTPC, and Mr. Ajay Sharma, General Manager BOS NTPC, and Mr. Chandran Idaya. Right after that, we saw a wonderful joint presentation from Reliance Industries where we saw Mr. Vikas Suwalka and Mr. Sanjeev Prasad presenting a case study and the best practices on how best operations and maintenance practices on how they are doing at their power plant. After that, we saw that there was some technical issue with Mr. Sharma. That is the reason we are expecting him to join us today for the presentation in the second half. And today we are doing a session which is a day two where we are talking about how we can achieve 100% operational efficiency in thermal power plants. And for that, we have Dr. Sheshnath Dubey from Adani Power and Dr. Ashwini Kumar Sinha. Dr. R.B. Mathur was supposed to come, but because of the COVID scenario, because he's in a post-COVID recovery and a little critical, that is why he's not able to join us. He has shared his apologies. And after that, we are looking forward for some wonderful joint presentations and technical sessions where we are going to talk about the best operations and maintenance practices, how innovative that can be, how you can include the process-driven approach to achieve operational efficiency. And for that, we will be joined by Mr. M.V. Venugopal Rao, Mr. N.K. Singh, Mr. Shashir Dubey, Ms. Shivali Khalsi, Mr. N.K. Ansari, Sri Arun Prasad, Gopesh Vijay, and Mr. Jai Prakash Verma throughout the day, where they'll be touching on various subjects which are need of the hour for the current scenario where we are seeing the post-COVID world at this moment. Now, moving forward, as you can see, we would like to invite Dr. Ashwini Kumar Sinha, but before that, I guess Mr. Rao joined by mistake. Mr. Rao, you are not a part of this session. Would you like to be off the stage so that we can initiate? And we see that a few of the delegates are expecting a little trouble to log in, and they are looking at the notification which says seats are full. So for that, we would like to request you to use the same email address that you are using in the past to log in. Otherwise, it'll show that the seats are full because you are already registered. You have already registered yesterday, so no point of registering it again. And you can use the same link and join us for the session. So I'm just saying that so that if there are their colleagues present here, they can pass on the message to them. And before we move, we are expecting Dr. Dubey to join us, but he's having a firewall technical issue that our team is resolving. And by the time he joins, I would like to welcome Mr. Ashwini Kumar Sinha, who joined us yesterday as well to share a wonderful perspective on the subject, where we talk about why it is so imperative that we are looking at the plant performance in TPPs, where he actually shared his view on how the world was pre-COVID, how the world changed during the COVID, and what we can expect in the post-COVID scenario. Today, what we are going to talk about is achieving 100% operational efficiency in TPPs, a wonderful word a wonderful line to hear, I'm sure, for many thermal power experts here and the subject matters here. And I would request Mr. Sinha to give his open thoughts before we move, inviting Dr. Dubey's thoughts, and we can proceed with the session. Dr. Sinha, good morning. Welcome to the second
Good
day of the
morning.
conference.
Good morning and good morning, everybody.
So here, if you look at the subject, which is a very interesting topic, which says 100% operational efficiency in thermal power plants. You are an expert of the sector. What are your thoughts? When we say it's COVID and post COVID and the world has changed, we would like to have your opening remarks, opening thoughts on the same subject. Over to you, Mr. Sinha.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Miksha. And morning, everybody. The subject is a highly relevant thing. We are talking about 100% operational efficiency. That means once we are talking about operational efficiency, we should have our capability re-examine that how our systems are available, what are their conditions. I mean, like what we discussed yesterday, probably if we go in continuation of that thing, both effect of COVID or effect of renewables or due to other constraints, most of the plants are working in a flexible operation mode. So during this flexible operation mode, how well have we maintained our systems? How well we have seen that the systems are capable of delivering their 100% efficient values, be it 5 megawatt, be it say 800 megawatt supercritical power or ultra supercritical. But the problem is, sometime during this period, there is a lack of proper care or the maintenance of the all systems. Yesterday we discussed about cycle chemistry related issues. Today probably two things I would like to discuss. One part is fuel side. The fuel side, some part we discussed yesterday, like because of the non-availability of proper coal or this thing, then what we are doing is we are importing coal. Now, if you are importing coal, imported coal is a high GCV coal. Most of our systems are designed for the low GCV coal. They were not, see, there is a certain amount of margins are there in the design, but they are not designed to operate on a something about say 6,000, 7,000 kilocalorie values. Because normally in our coal it is 4,000 to 5,000 GCV that we are getting. So if the system is not designed to operate with a high GCV coal, there are number of issues are there. One, there is a possibility that you may have more slagging. If the slagging occurs or the deposition occurs, again your heat transfer is affected. You have to increase the temperature, and that means increasing the temperature means you have to put more fuel. You put more fuel, that means more cost to you. Now this is one part of the cost of it. Second part of the, now how that affects. See, in that case, there are certain things in the combustion side also. You need to maintain minimum amount of say about 4% of oxygen. But due to certain reason, if you're not able to maintain that level, what will happen is you will have a problem in the slagging or the fire side corrosion. So if the fire side corrosion occurs, it is going to destroy your say superheater or the water valve tube side because of the combustion effects. And the second thing, of course, as I said, the cost, of course, is going to increase once you are going to increase the fuel consumption. The other part of it is, see, mostly the imported coal, they have a low melting elements like calcium, magnesium, iron, which is more, and many of them they contain vanadium. If the vanadium content is higher, then there is every possibility that we may have a possibility of fire side corrosion. That means uh, system corrosion from the fire side or the flue gas side. And yesterday, the one slide that I showed, because of that, how the heat transfer is going to affect. So in case if that happens, what will happen? Your metal temperature will go up. Well, because if you are using a high GCV coal, then what is happening is you are putting a higher amount of energy into the system. Once you are putting the heat energy which is higher, what will happen is it will increase the metal temperature. So once the metal temperature is increasing, there is every possibility that whatever the oxides are inside, they may start exfoliating. Second thing is, because of the high metal temperature, the metal itself is likely to fail because of the continuous or the long term effect of the temperature, heat effects. Now, this is one aspect of the combustion side. Second thing that we look into it is like yesterday, what we discussed about the cycle chemistry. There are certain operating standards based on the temperature and pressure of the boiler. You have to maintain that water chemistry as per the requirement. Now, one basic criteria for that is how good is your water that has been treated. Today, for most of the boiler, the general limit is that you have an input water, a DM water quality of minimum 0.1 microsiemens per centimeter conductivity. That means you have to generate your DM water to a level that at least zero point 0.1 microsiemen. Lower is better. That means less than 0.1 microsiemen is still better, but at least minimum is 0.1 microsiemen. Now, zero point 0.1 microsiemen, what is happening is you are putting lot of systems. You have a pre-treatment system, like you have a clarifier, you have a filter, and then it goes to the complete DM plant system. Now the DM plant system, when it goes there, there's a chain of systems there, SBA, SSE, and a degasser, everything, and then finally it goes to the polishing unit, mixed bed, the output which is expected to be uh, less than 1 conductivity or lower, which is the minimum that is there. But what happens is today, if you are using all this system, that means if I have SAB, SSC, degasser, and all those system is there, then it goes to the MB. So in that process, what happens is that means your number of systems which are increasing. So your system maintenance, your water wastage, chemical wastage is more. So second step people came is, instead of having a pre-treatment by normal clarifier and other thing, now people have gone in for the UF RO, followed by directly, because RO output is less than 10 microsiemens, so that can be directly fed to MB. So with that one, what happens is the output is less than 0.1 or better than that conductivity from the MB. So my entire DM chain has gone, chemical wastage has gone there, my time in maintaining that thing is avoided, and I'm getting a better quality thing. Now, the next step which is changing, at least outside it has already changed, India still it is in the process of being changed. MB has also been replaced. It has been replaced now by continuous electro deionization. Now the continuous de-electrolyzation, what is the thing? It's a continuous anionic cationic reaction. Membrane-based system is there. So it is a auto regeneration system is there. So your MB regeneration is also bypassed. It is auto regeneration is there. And then second thing is, because of this system, wastage is comparatively lower, and you get a much better quality than ordinary MB system. This avoids a lot of system, avoids a lot of wastage of the chemicals and time and everything. And you get a better quality of thing. This is one part of it. The other part that becomes is, I mean, this is the field water that you are putting. So if you are getting good quality field water, obviously your boiler system is expected to perform to the best level. Because today, for most of the high pressure boilers, I mean low pressure, I'm not talking about what I discussed yesterday. High pressure boiler, the general requirements are if you are operating either in all volatile reducing mode or all volatile oxidizing mode, my total iron content should be less than 2 ppb at the outlet. That means in the system, in the feed water as well as the after the uh, your condensate extraction pump CP or the steam side. So all places it has to be less than 2 ppb. 2 ppb problem there is many places still people are operating with the normal spectrophotometric mode. You cannot detect 2 ppb with that spectrophotometric mode. So for that you need either AS or you need ion chromatograph or ICP or that kind of thing to measure the 2 ppb level. And there my requirement to control corrosion also is less than 2 ppm of 2 ppb of chloride and 2 ppb of sulfate. So of course, chloride sulfate still not many people measuring. Chloride still some people are doing some measurement, but again with the spectrophotometric method, so we don't get accurate results. But that also today there are online systems are there. You are operating on that one. So based on that thing, you are able to contain your system once your chloride, sulfate, and iron is well within the limit. And of course, silica with this kind of system is obviously going to be well within the limit. Less than 10 ppb is the limit. So that is going to be in within that one. So with this one, what happens is you get a good quality of water and you are able to maintain your boiler water chemistry to the extent possible or required for the efficient operation of the boiler. And your life of the boiler tube or the system is increased because your see basically what is meant by iron. It is basically whatever has been corroded from the system, that is what is coming out as iron. So if you are able to contain that value to the lowest value of less than 2 ppb, that means your system life is enhanced, your system availability is improved, and because the deposition is less, your heat transfer conditions are better. You are able to contain your efficiency or the heat rate because of this factor. Now this is as per the boiler parts is concerned. Now come to the other part, which is the important, like yesterday what I discussed. The major heat output is going to the cooling water system. That is where the major losses are there in the cooling water system. Now in the cooling water system, unfortunately, this is a site-specific requirement. Like boiler, it is dependent on pressure and temperature of the boiler. You have standardized the chemical treatment or the water treatment which is to be followed. Whereas in case of cooling water, because at different site, different quality of water is available, so you have to develop a strategy of uh, treatment of the water for the cooling purposes. Or alternately, like people are now going in for the I mean dry air or the air cooled system. So air cooled system, of course, your efficiency goes down. In some cases, it can go even go down as low as 11%. So the other thing people started working is the hybrid of air cooled system, and a part of it is cooled. So at least you are able to improve some of the efficiencies. But those kind of systems are very well being used at those places where there is a scarcity of the water. If the cooling water is not sufficiently, like places like Rajasthan, places like Tamil Nadu, where there is a scarcity of water. So there people have started already moving to the air cooled system. So air cooled system either single or in hybrid with the your cooling system, but system. So combined with together, so with combination of that thing, probably you are able to contain the efficiency losses to about say 5 to 7% in the dry and the hybrid system combination. Whereas in the pure dry system, in some cases it can go even up to 11% losses can be there because of the losses in the efficiency part of it. other part is the treatment that you are doing. If your treatment, cooling water, normal cooling water, if you are not doing a proper treatment and monitoring it properly, what will happen? It will cause three major issues. One is the corrosion in the system, other is the fouling in the system or deposition in the system, and third is the microbiological issues. Microbiological today is enhancing in a very high manner, and that too considering today's scenario. If you look at it, see what we are doing for the COVID control everywhere. We are doing only sanitization, no? And what is that sanitization? Mostly people are using some kind of oxides, I mean either chlorine dioxide, or any of these things to disinfect the thing. Now, whatever you are doing, that is where you are disinfecting. But your water, which is there, today it is containing high level of organics, most of the water, because many of the city you will see there are untreated sewage water which is joining the main river or the main source of the water in that area. So if that is joining, that means your organic loading is already high. So if you are not able to do a proper biocide treatment there, what will happen? Your system will have a bifalling. If the bifalling occurs, it has two problems. One, bifalling is a very low heat transfer coefficient. So that means your heat transfer is drastically reduced. Second thing is it causes microbiologically induced corrosion, especially even in the places like stainless steel, what we call as the something which is a corrosion resistant we call as. But stainless steel also is highly prone to even 316 or even duplex stainless steel. They are prone to microbiologically induced corrosion. So that means we have to take care of that. Second thing, if the deposit occurs in the condenser tube, now if that deposit occurs, my heat rate will go down, because again in that, because of that thing, you have to put more energy to get to the same level. So that means what you are using is, once your heat rate is going up, that means your efficiency is losing. So if you are able to contain your system in a manner that your heat rate is well within the your design limits, obviously you are operating at a very good level. And then you have a, because it is a steam which is coming, that is getting condensed in the condenser. So in that steam, you have an option of monitoring of cation conductivity and sodium. These two things, if you are monitoring, then you are able to see if there is a condenser tube leakage. Because if there is any condenser tube leakage, it will immediately affect your boiler system. But there's a lot of uh, bad quality water will enter into the high purity water which is used in the boiler. So because of that thing, boiler will be under a strain, or including the turbine side, we will have problem because of these issues. If there is a lot of condenser tube leakage is there, because many times people what they do is the condenser tube leakage is there is a small seepage is there, but they are still continue to generate. They don't stop. Normally, if you see the thing, you should stop the plant or the unit and identify what is the source of leakage, plug it, and then only you should run it. But many people, because of their operational requirement, many times they don't close it if they notice even small seepage of cooling water in the boiler side. But that should not be done, because it is ultimately going to affect my entire efficiency and availability and performance of the total unit. So I mean, based on this thing, if you look at it, these areas equally need to be considered. Now the third aspect which has come in today, that is the part water conservation, because there is already a guideline from the MOEF that you have to reduce your water consumption to 3 meter cube per megawatt. Now, if you have to reduce your total water consumption to 3 meter cube per megawatt, and your water requirement is more, then what is the next option is you have to recycle it. So many places, the thing that has been done is the cooling water blowdown is recycled through UFRO. And in RO, you can have two options. One option is the output of that is about less than 100 microsiemens per centimeter. Other part of it, that is less than 10 microsiemens per centimeter. That less than 10 microsiemens is something, that quantity that we need to identify, which is required for your DM generation. I mean, boiler feed water requirement. Considering that thing, you use that as feed it either directly to MB or feed it to the JD system, and then you get a boiler water out of the recycled cooling water. Rest of it, with the 100 microsiemens conductivity, you can use it as a makeup to the your cooling water. Of course, in cooling water, major losses are the evaporation losses. So in any case, that makeup has to be done for cooling water. But in this way, you are able to contain the thing and then probably improve your water quality also in the process, both cooling water as well as the boiler water quality. So I think if these are the things which are considered in view, both combined together. And of course, the last part, of course, is the FGD part. If the FGD, like I said, there are mainly two systems are there, either the line-based system or seawater-based system. If it is at seawater course, so seawater, if you are doing what normally people do it, the seawater is used there in the FGD after the process, because it contains a lot of alkalis that treats the sulfuric acid formed by the sulfur content of the fuel, and then it is reoxidized to form calcium sulfate, the seawater, and then sent back to the system, because calcium sulfate is already a part of the seawater. So we are not changing the chemistry there. It's basically we are regenerating and putting back to the system. So that is one of the easiest thing. The other part is the lime side. So in the lime-based system, there is a formation of calcium sulfate or gypsum. So there are two issues are there. One, you have to get the basic source, that is the lime. Then calcium sulfate, which is from there, you have to use it or sell it. Mostly gypsum is used for some board and other thing. Construction industry, they use it. But then if all power plants start doing that thing, then probably it is going to be havoc. So far, only a few of them are doing it. Others are in the process of installing the FGD and then operating it. But if all plants do it, then there will be a problem. Second problem becomes, now whatever the water is coming out as an output, you have to treat that water also, because this FGD water has to be treated, and then only you can either dispose it or maybe use it. So probably this also can be thought about. Places where you have a wet ash system, probably that can be put there in the wet ash system. But places now where most of the places they have a dry ash system, so there that also possibility is also not there. Then you have to think about the entire system being recycling and then making the entire system available. So anyway, this is some of the thoughts which I thought I'll put it to you, and maybe if there are certain other views also there, we can have a discussion.
That was actually spot on and a great start to the entire subject from a perspective which we discussed yesterday. But this was a very, very comprehensive tone of it, where this actually helped us to understand as an overall perspective. And we already have a question, Mr. Sinha. I want to share that with you. Is from GGEL, and he's asking, sir, in some plants we make up DM water with gravity to save auxiliary. Will it harm pipes?
See, DM water in any case is a corrosive water. DM water or RO water is a corrosive water. So if your pipeline is non-metallic, there is no problem. But if your pipelines, normally for DM water, any DM water transportation, either you use a stainless steel pipeline or you use a non-metallic pipeline like CPVC and other these kind of things. So if it is a stainless steel, it is the same way whether you are transporting it to this level or after pumping. It doesn't make difference there. But if it is a mild steel, yes, you cannot use it unless until it is coated or rubber lined. Rubber lining these days is not a very good option, because the quality of rubber these days is not very good and application is also poor. So at least I prefer to have a good epoxy coating inside if you want to use a epoxy mild steel pipeline. But otherwise, normally preferred system is stainless steel or non-metallic pipeline.
Great. I hope that answers Bharat's question, and we are glad to welcome all the delegates here because we can see the numbers coming up, and people are joining again. Now we have raised hand who are asking. The person is Ashok Singh Yadav, plant head for Jhabua Power Limited. I'm handing the mic to him if he has a question to ask.
Yeah.
Ashokji, what is your question? Ashokji, you are here with us. What is your question? Please ask. No problem. We'll move to the next hand we see, and I'll hand over the mic to Mr. Mukul Rajan, who's the General Manager Technical Services for Jhabua Power. Mukulji, you are on stage. Please ask your question. They're raising hands, but I guess they misinterpreted it. And so, delegates, when you raise hand,
Probably, I think, Mishraji, if those people somewhere, if there is, I don't know if there is some technical problem or anything, they can put it in the question and then we can ask it in
Yeah.
that way. I mean, reply in that one also.
Yeah. So, Mr. Mukul and Mr. Ashok ji, आप questions में please write your question in the question section and we will take it from there. Because if you are facing any technical difficulty, that's not a problem. And others can also raise hand if they have any questions or write down in the chat or question section. We have one more question where the person is asking, how important are the initial and final steam parameters when we are talking about operational efficiency?
Okay. See, whether, as I said, that as per the steam parameters are concerned, what basically it means, we are talking about the temperature that we are able to achieve as per the design. And as I said, that steam parameter, there are already defined things are there based on the parameters, that tables that I showed yesterday. Depending upon what kind of feed water chemistry we are operating, whether all volatile reducing or all volatile oxidizing or oxidizing treatment, whichever we are operating, or maybe some of the older plant, they may still be operating with the phosphate based treatment. Now, whatever happens is steam water quality, at least it is defined more by the turbine manufacturer. Turbine manufacturer says that most of the turbine manufacturer these days, they talk about less than 3 ppb of sodium in the steam. Okay, because if the sodium is more, what is going to happen is the sodium will form either sodium carbonate, sodium silicate, or anything, and will deposit on the turbine. And it is also going to cause problem in the, I mean, if the more sodium is there, it can become a caustic related issue also and cause a caustic embrittlement also. So those things, that is why they have defined the turbine this thing. So your steam parameters have to meet your turbine manufacturer's requirement. Though general limit as per the EPRA, I have already shown in the table. What are the steam parameters? What are the parameters to be followed at condensate thing? And overall, if they are followed, you are able to, at least from the water chemistry point of view, you will be able to meet your efficiency target. But if they are deviated, then yes, there are consequences are there depending upon to what extent you have done the deviation.
Wonderful. I hope that answers the question. We have another question from Mr. Rajiv Kumar, DGM for NTPC Vindhyachal, asking if there is increase in chloride in boiler water, but silica and condensate conductivity remains within the limit, what will be the reason? Maybe condenser tube leakage. CPU resin is also okay.
Rajiv, problem there is, If your chloride is increasing, your conductivity cannot remain the same. Your cation, I mean, the first major thing that you need to check up is your cation conductivity. In the normal conductivity, there can be a problem, maybe there may be some issues because of the ingress of carbon dioxide, or maybe some deterioration of the some chemicals, organic chemicals, into the organic acid. So that is why today your better criteria is cation conductivity. So if your cation conductivity and the sodium levels, they are normal level, that means you are not facing any condenser related issue. But if they are increasing, cation conductivity and sodium, they are increasing, then it is an indication that there is either a condenser tube leakage or seepage, or some issue there. Or maybe if you have a CPU, normally in Vindhyachal, of course, you don't have CPU. I think maybe 33% could be there. But if there is a problem with the CPU regeneration or anything, that may also reflect in. But normally in those cases, the sodium and cation conductivity both will not change. If both are changing, that is a direct indication there is a problem in your condenser side.
Rajiv ji, I hope that answers the question. And if you have a follow-up
Otherwise,
question,
Rajiv can always get back to me. He's an old colleague of mine.
wonderful. So Rajiv ji, it's an open invitation. You can connect with Sinha ji on the virtual table that we have created during the networking break. Mr. Sinha, we have a bunch of questions. So next is from Mukul ji, who tried to raise hand. So he's asking, we face pinhole leakage issue in our ACW system, mild steel pipe. What could be the possible reason for the pipe for the pinholes?
In the auxiliary cooling water pipeline. Am I right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. See, auxiliary cooling water pipeline or fire water pipeline, they are comparatively systems where velocities are lower. Most in the normal cooling water system, we have a velocity of which is more than 1.5 meter per second, 1.5 to 2 meter per second in the condenser also. Whereas in the auxiliary cooling water system, all other systems are not always operative. Second thing is the velocities are lower there. And if your water has not been treated properly for the auxiliary cooling water also, and there is a lot of stagnancy in the system, or maybe there are organics are there, they are the reasons which cause you pinhole leakages in the auxiliary cooling water or the fire water system. So there you need to do a flushing in between, and if required, if your auxiliary cooling water is untreated water, it would be better that you treat it. And in case your auxiliary cooling water pipelines are higher than the 800 dia pipeline, it will be much better you coat it with one of the good coating is the vinyl ester glass plate coating. Use that vinyl ester glass plate coating, put it inside the pipeline. Above 800, it is possible. Less than that, probably in the existing pipeline, it will be difficult because people cannot enter to do the coating. Then you have to use the automatic system of the coating that you can do it. But yes, you can still do that. The other thing is, in such cases, you can always install in the pipeline some sacrificial cathodic protection system, which will help you in a corrosion protection of the pipeline. Whether it is a thing, but firefighter pipeline, this is slightly more because there the diameters are generally lower than 300 So there we have, because there are a lot of stagnancies are there, so there you need to follow that you have a regular flushing of the system, you have a treatment, you have a chlorination, all those things in place for the fire water. That is something which can improve your system there. But the auxiliary cooling water system, at least my personal feeling is, in the long run, people should think about replacing these pipelines with a non-metallic pipeline, because ultimately they are all corrosive substituent, and we will keep on attending that many of them, if they are buried, then they will be subject to corrosion from soil side as well as from the water side. So that means if their soil side is there, you have to put the cathodic protection there also. So avoiding all those things, if it is possible, start changing in a phased manner to the non-metallic pipeline for these things, except for the fire water. Fire water is technically not approved as yet to use the non-metallic pipeline. If something, you can always get back to me.
Mukulji, I hope that answers in a very descriptive format, but still, if you feel that you have few more points as a follow-up question, please feel free to connect with Mr. Sinha in the networking break. We have next question from Mr. Devashish Karmakar. I'm handing over the mic to him. Devashish ji is Senior Manager from NTPC Vidyanagar.
Morning, Karmakar. Hope you remember me.
Morning, sir.
Devashish ji, you are on stage. Please ask your question.
Good morning, sir. Yes, sir. I remember very well,
Morning.
sir.
You remember me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
I remember you very
Tell
well,
me.
sir. Very well, sir. How are you, sir?
Fine.
Sir,
How are
my
you?
question is basically, yes, sir. Fine, sir. Fine, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, my question is basically the um, addition of what my friend Rajiv Kumar told, that is the increase in chloride level in boiler. I wanted to add one thing here. It is being observed in a particular unit here in our Vindhyachal plant. There is a increase in chloride level without affecting the ACC and sodium levels. Sir. How it is possible? Our sodium
See,
level and the ACC level is perfectly all right, well within the
how
limit,
much
but
how much sodium you are getting at the steam and
it
in
is,
the CP?
yes, sir, it is less than 2 ppb, sir.
Less than 2 ppb you are getting constantly,
Yes, sir,
or the
constantly less than
variation
2
is there.
ppb we are using. And ACC level also it lies in point 0.2 only, sir, less than point 0.2.
Less than point one. What is the normal values?
This is the normal value, sir. Well, point 15,
See,
point 13, like that it is running, sir.
how much chloride you have got?
Something around 300 or more,
300
or 40
ppb.
ppb. Yes, sir.
300 ppb is a pretty high level. That means there is some source of seepage. It may not be directly a leakage. It could be some seepage in the condenser, mostly at the tube to plate joint. Because the
Sir,
seepages
then it
are
must,
something which are not immediately that you will get the thing. They will slowly move and may not be doing it all the time. So sometimes there is some seepage is there, then sometimes it gets plugged and then again it starts again. But if you have something further, probably you can get back to me with the more detail or the then we can discuss it a little better.
sure, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Sure. I will get back to you, sir.
Yeah, yeah. Because anyway, Rajiv is always connected through me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Akshay.
Thank you, Devashish ji. Moving to the next question, because Mr. Sinha, you have pressed some real issues and you have actually pointed out some wonderful alternatives and solutions that has triggered the entire thermal power sector, I feel, because we are receiving so many questions. Next is manager from Balco Vedanta Korba. I'm handling the mic to Mr. Arun Prasad.
Mm-hmm. B. Arun Prasad.
Sri Arun Prasad, yes.
B. Arun Prasad. No, B. Shri Arun Prasad.
Sir, good
Morning,
morning.
Prasad sir. Morning.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. How are you, sir?
How are you?
I'm fine, sir. Thank you.
Arun ji, please
Yeah.
ask your question.
Sir, Sinha, sir, actually, unit 1 of 300 megawatt. Last month we
Uh-huh.
took shutdown. We did
Mm-hmm.
condenser cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
Still, after even bullet cleaning, also we found the scale deposits. It is not completely removed. Is there any other method other than cutting the tube and measuring the thickness, or is there any other solution other than eddy current?
See, As far as the solution part is concerned, that's a different thing, because there are, of course, eddy current and mixed part of NDT. That is something you do. But the other part of it is probably what you can do is simple measurement you can do by vernier. You the tube inlet, you
Sir.
check the thickness. I mean the tube thickness dia. You can check it across the entire diameter and see if there are certain things, probably physically also, because at least if my assessment is right, if you remember, we discussed this issue long
Sir.
back, because
Long back.
there is a probably a calcium based scale deposition, or maybe there is a some silica also might be there, but mostly I believe it should be calcium based. So that is where the problem is there. So what probably we have to do is, probably we have to scratch at least the inlet part of it as far as possible, and then take it to the tube and test it simply by putting hydrochloric acid. If there is the effervescence is there, then definitely this is calcium carbonate. And if it is the calcium carbonate or the mixed of this lot, it will not be removed by bullet cleaning. You have to go in for the chemical cleaning only.
Okay, fine, sir. We are on the process, sir. We'll remove the sample and we will let you know, sir, as discussed. I'll
Yeah, I mean,
come to you
because
for
you
both the
remember
units.
when we were discussing our fill problem, that
Yes,
time
sir.
itself I said that there is a deposition in your condenser.
Shame. Yes, yes, yes.
Because see, with the deposition, what will happen? You're already, once the fouling is there, so immediately your condenser, I mean, hot well temperature
Sir,
is a increasing trend.
it is
That
an
is what we
increasing
had
trend.
seen in the data that time. Okay, the
Yes,
hot well
yes, yes.
showing a high this thing. So that means if the
TTD
hot
TTD
well,
was also maintaining high only, sir. It was
yeah. So I
maintaining
mean
high.
TTD, vacuum, and those are some of the things. And vacuum also, we were not able to
Yes.
achieve as good as was expected. So these
Yeah,
are all
yeah, indeed.
indicating there is a fouling, and most probably this fouling can be because of the calcium based deposition. So you can try with some scrapping with this thing and testing in a test tube, uh, putting a sheet. If there is an effervescence, you can confirm that. Rest of the test you can do it later on, but this is the simplest that you can do it by putting
Sure, sir.
a stick in a test tube. You can see if there is the effervescence is there. It is a confirmed thing. It's a calcium carbonate based scale.
Okay, fine, sir. Fine, sir. I'll let you know, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Thank you,
Arun,
sir.
for joining us. Moving to the last question, we have from JSW Energy Barmer. He's asking, what is the maximum limit of chloride in CW water with special chemical treatment?
Depends on what is the metallurgy we are talking about. If you are using a stainless steel tube 304 or 316, the normal limit is about 200 ppm chloride for stainless steel 304, and for 316L, maximum we can go about 500 ppm, provided there is no fouling in the system. If there is a fouling in the system, even 200 ppm of chloride is very high for stainless steel 304 or even for 316L. And the other aspect is, if your tube is welded or, I mean, seam welded tube or a direct tube, with no welding. If the no welding is there, still you can tolerate little hair. But in case if you have already this problem and your material is stainless steel 304, say, which I suspect most of the cases it is that only. So in that case, you can add sodium molybdenate minimum 5 ppm to compensate, because there is a difference between 304 and 316 is basically of the molybdenum. 316 contains about 2% molybdenum, which gives a pitting and crevice resistance property to the 316. So since we cannot add it the material, what we are doing is we add sodium molybdenate in the system in a treatment program, along with the normal other treatment program which are meant for the mainly for the scale control and bifouling control and other thing. But for this thing, we can add sodium molybdenate to protect the condenser tube. But apart from the thing, there are other issues also there, which of course I don't know your particular case, because in this case, if your tube is say stainless steel and tube plate is carbon steel, and they are not properly coated and cathodiically protected, then there will be a galvanic action there. And if your microbiological controls are not there, then again the problem will be there. So you have to improve your microbiological control. Normally, I prefer to use ORP value, not the FRC. ORP value, I tried, if you're using oxidizing biocide, I prefer that normal ORP value should be 450 to 500 millivolt. And once in a while, you increase the level to go beyond 600 millivolt as a shock dose. And that time, you add additional biodispersant to remove the dead microbiological material. Because like I said, whatever the microbiological issues are there, they are very well seen on the stainless steel material, including duplex 2205 also. I hope that answers the thing. If there's further.
I hope that answers Gopesh Vijay's question on the subject. And with that note, if we do not have any more questions, we'll be moving towards the first networking break, and we will join again at 11:30 for the next set of speakers. So we will take a minute to see if we have any more questions, and if not, we will move ahead with the next sessions. I hope this was very, very informative, Mr. Sinha, because it actually turned out really well when people had some really important concerns at the current time with regards to the subject that you actually pointed out. And this was a discussion we had when you suggested that you want to press on these notes, and it actually turned out so amazingly well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we have one last, this is the last question that we can take, otherwise we'll run out of time. We have a question which is, what is best LSI or RSI for scaling in condenser?
Okay. LSI and RSI. Among the two, I prefer, for any treated water, I prefer RSI. RSI between 6 to 7 is virtually a neutral one. So that means between 6 to 7, if your RSI is there, it's a virtually, the water is neither very corrosive nor very scaling. If it is more than 7, then the water is corrosive. If it is less than 6, then it becomes scaling in nature. And that means if it is, moment it crosses 5.8 lower values, then scaling tendency is high. So you have to have your treatment suited to these kind of RSI, whatever actually is coming, and you have to see at the operating COC, that means cycle of concentration, what is the likely RSI or LSI. Based on that thing, then you have to assess your treatment program and modify the treatment program to suit to that level. Because as per the today's requirement, your cycle of concentration. So once your cycle of concentration is increasing, and if your raw water itself is in the scaling side, at the higher level, it will be still more scaling in nature. Or with corrosive thing, it may become slightly scaling side at a higher COC. So that is where you need to do the total assessment of your water quality at both raw water or the makeup water quality, as well as the circulating water quality at the operating cycles of concentration. Based on that thing, you can assess your thing and identify the proper treatment program.
So he's only asking, there's a follow-up from him, that how to measure condenser cleanliness factor of condenser.
Okay, there are methods are there, but one important thing that we discussed just now, see, it will affect your vacuum, it will affect TTD, it will affect the heat transfer coefficient, and other very simple parameter is the condenser hot well temperature. If it is increasing beyond the design temperature, it is an indication there is a fouling in the system. Then you can do the detailed analysis. But the simplest test is, because see, the turbine exhaust temperature is about 80 degree, and by the time the cooling water, it is cooled through the heat transfer and goes out, then the water temperature, design hot well temperature, generally is between 42 to 45 degrees centigrade. So that is a simple thing you can check up there, that if the temperature is increasing, TTD is increasing, your vacuum is declining, not coming to the normal level, then your system is not clean.
And I hope that answers the last question of the session, because we have to move forward and we will run out of time. And if you have any more question, Shivam, you can further connect with Mr. Sinha during the networking break in the virtual table. And there you have to just figure out on what table Mr. Sinha is in. And then I'm sure there will be many people who would like to sit with him for
Yeah,
multiple
otherwise,
questions.
Akshay,
Yeah.
yesterday what my presentation which I forwarded to you, that contains my email also. So if somebody has the thing, they can get back on my email. If it is a shorter thing, it can always be discussed further.
Absolutely. So it's an added information for all the delegates that right after the conference, within 4 to 5 working days, business days, we'll be sharing the presentations and the details. So to all the registered attendees, where most of the speakers have shared their details, who would like to further connect with you all, and like Mr. Sinha said. The moment we will share the presentation with you all, you can further connect with them over the mail or over the phone as per their convenience. On that note, I would like to really thank Mr. Sinha for joining us again. We understand that you were a part of the panel yesterday, but today's session turned out to be a highlight one where it went on to be a fireside session. And it's an absolute honor for me to have this session with you because it turned out to be very informative for the thermal power sector. Thank you so much for joining us, and please
Thank
stay
you.
safe.
Thank you, Mr. Akshay.
Moving on, after this wonderful start for day two, where we spoke about achieving 100% operational efficiency in thermal power plants from the angle of Dr. Ashwini Kumar Sinha, we will be going for a very quick break so that you all can grab your breakfast if not already, and you can connect with people in the virtual table where we have given this feature so that you can connect with the people like a networking event that you used to do in the physical events. But looking at the current scenario, we have made it possible in the virtual world as well. Right after that, we have some amazing set of speakers who are going to join us, like Mr. N.K. Singh, who are joining us from GIPCL, Mr. N.B. Venugopal Rao, who is joining us from Singarani Collieries, and then we have Mr. Shashir Dubey and Ms. Shivalika joining us from NTPC. Till then, I would request you to enjoy a networking break, and we'll be back again sharp at 11:30 with the next set of speakers and their presentations. Thank you so much.